Want to go far in business and in life? You can't do it alone. The secret is expanding your network of personal relationships, building friendships, connecting on an intimate level, away from the office, over a coffee or cocktail. Welcome to All In with Nate Payo, the show that asks what happens when you go all in and leverage the power of your network of personal relationships.
Welcome to the All In podcast with Nate Payo. Of course, I'm your host, Nate Payo. Today, I'm joined with Lauren Kress, the business scientist. She's one of the few theoretically trained scientists at growth innovators of the millennial generation, whose knowledge of investment-led growth is transforming decision-making in the business world. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Thank you, Nate, and thank you for the lovely introduction. It always feels so impressive when you have someone else read out your bio.
It does. It's very, very impressive. So before I have some questions though about your bio, but before we get to that, I just want to talk a little bit about how we met, which was through LinkedIn. Did we connect over like a comment, or like how did like the conversation start happening? I don't really recall. Do you?
I think maybe we have a mutual connection who suggested but I remember it was LinkedIn, but then I saw you on Instagram as well. So you popped up a couple of times and then you were in my calendar and I was like, okay, This guy's podcasting, that's cool.
Well, that's what I think is really cool about LinkedIn is like, if you're kind of like using it to meet people and you're open-minded about it. And I think having a podcast kind of like opens the door for like connecting with people who you might normally reach out to, because if they have a podcast, like, okay, at least we're talking about podcasts, but if their topics not of the same interest, there's still something you can bridge and still connect and still chat about. But if it's like just, hey, you're in one industry, I'm in another industry, sometimes we don't reach out and connect with those people. And having a podcast, you're just kind of like, hey, you want to like chat about a podcast? And you're like, yeah, sure, I suppose. Let's get on a phone call. And then like an hour later, you're like, oh, we should have done a podcast. And so just sat here and chatted for like an hour and a half about like all kinds of cool stuff. So LinkedIn's so fun for just meeting cool people like that.
Oh, 100% agree. LinkedIn is by far my favorite social media platform. And you know, I was just speaking with someone before who kind of said like, oh, I find LinkedIn is a lot of work. And I'm like, it can be a lot of work, but here in Australia anyway, and I looked at the stats for America as well, it is just so much more effective at, driving traffic to business websites in particular. Mm-hmm. But also I think you're right, like just in terms of being able to reach out to people and have a conversation. I don't think I've ever reached out to someone in a genuine way and said like, hey, can we have a chat? And they've been rude or said no. Mm-hmm. Like pretty much everyone is like, sure, we can do that.
What I also like about it is like the intrigue it kind of builds when like you connect with people. So I don't think people realize, like if you're on Facebook or Instagram and you post something and a lot of people don't log into Instagram or LinkedIn every day, but if you didn't log into Facebook every day, whatever somebody posted on Monday, if you log on Wednesday, it's like gone. Like you'll never see it. It's not showing up in your feed anymore. But on LinkedIn, like stuff will show up. Like you can post something and then like a week and a half later, like somebody that you're connected with and know like likes it and sees it. So you know it's still getting a lot of views. But then when people like it, or if I like something you posted, or I comment and like somebody's that I know's comment that liked on your comment, like you show up in the feed and your little intro, your little picture shows up like, hey, so-and-so liked your post or liked your friend's post or like this and this. And like, who's that person that keeps kind of like showing up in my feed? And then you like go on their profile and then they get noticed that like, some people hate this. They're like, who viewed your profile? It's like, oh, Nate was viewing Lauren's profile, like creeper. No, then all of a sudden you're like, what are you looking at my profile for? I'm going to follow you back. And like, then you're connected and you're like, hey, what's up? What's going on?
100%. I think the other thing as well is like, I mean, again, different parts of the world use Facebook differently, right? So I know in Russia, Facebook is seen as like the more like professional platform where they use another platform called, I think it's like Konkatke or something like, I don't know how to say it. That's like their like fun social media platform. Like we in Australia use Facebook more as like, you know, it's the fun platform where, you know, and it's more personal. LinkedIn is your professional one. And what I find so intriguing about LinkedIn is some people have such interesting careers. In the past, I think the way we thought about career was like, oh, it's, 40 years doing the same job, pretty much. Maybe you work your way up like the corporate ladder or something. Where now I'm like, oh, this person's like a board director, they're a podcaster, they run their own business, they seem like they've got some other little side project happening. You can actually see the diversity of someone's work and their purpose. And I don't think there's another social media platform that does that in that way.
No, you're right about that. Because if you looked at what it was founded for, is like to do like job search and be an online digital resume. And when you used to do resumes, it'd be like, okay, keep it professional. Don't show any gaps of work and list all your accomplishments. And then maybe if you had some room within, I think it was also true when you're like just getting started your career, you didn't have anything to put on your resume. It was like, put like your interest in hobbies and stuff like that. And it'd be like, what does, some random hobby, like I played, sports in high school, or I was really into equestrian stuff, like have anything to do. But on LinkedIn, you can showcase your hobbies and how it translates to a real developable skill. If you said like I podcast about a hobby, like I know how to create marketing, I know how to do websites, I know how to engage with people and connect with people and build something from scratch, and people could kind of like, oh wow, there's a whole other world to you. And I think when you also showcase that side of yourself to people, you're more easily relatable. And there's a bond that you can have. So if you're in sales, and for me in my day job, is I'm a professional buyer, so I get approached all the time, and so I get like basically my inbox is always flooded with spammy messages, and I'm like delete. But if somebody kind of comes across as personable and introduces themselves in a way to me that makes me relate to them, that's not just a sales pitchy, then I feel like, oh, this person's kind of got a different take on it. Like I'm going to engage them in a conversation back. And then all of a sudden it goes and kind of gets legs of its own. All of a sudden you're talking about a bunch of other stuff. You're like, oh, by the way, what do you do? And then they say, oh, I sell some stuff you might want to buy. I'm like, yeah, sure. We're getting along. We're having a good conversation. Like, let's take a look and see where it goes. And so a lot of really good business relationships for me have developed out of that friendly conversation first that evolved into a business thing versus just, leading with, here's my 16 paragraph email about how awesome I am and what I can do for you. That's what's cool. So before we get all over the place, let's go back to the business scientist. What is theoretically trained? Tell me the difference between you and somebody else that's helping people grow their business.
So thank you for the question. I love this question, and I do get asked it a bit in different ways. People have been asking about theoretically trained before. So in science, when I was doing my science degree, and in science, we kind of learn about how to apply scientific frameworks to growing knowledge. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I sort of found working in business. So for me, what happened was basically I didn't like working in a lab. I worked in a lab for a year doing my honors research in neuroscience. I was sort of running a little blog on the side just as like a bit of like letting go of some of the creative energy I had pent up from working in a lab, and ended up in communications. And then as I started working communications and in marketing and seeing how businesses worked, I was like, oh, like there should be so much more of the science and the way that we grow our knowledge in science being applied to business, because in science we just have these very simple frameworks for asking questions and then digging into that question to really understand what's going on in any particular situation. And what I found with business is a lot of the time when there was a problem, people wanted to like jump straight into a solution. So I was like, oh, we have this problem, therefore we should do this. And I was like, oh, but that solution is full of assumptions. It's full of bias. And how do we know that we're making the best decision we can given this situation? And, there's other people that have written about the value of applying science in marketing and in business. Like I'm not the first person to do that. But I just found that those critical thinking skills and being able to go, hang on, let's just ask some questions about this problem first, has been what's helped me in my career and in in the places I've worked for, and now with my clients in my own business as well.
I think that's a really cool approach, because so often when we have problems, we take anecdotal evidence and we project like, hey, this is a problem. Let's go like do this solution. And the solution sometimes doesn't solve the problem, or sometimes it's a Band-Aid for the problem. If you do start going back to the root cause, like we have this thing all the time where like something will get brought up and say, hey, we have a leak in one of our apartments. And we need to find out what the problem is. And you say, okay, well, how many leaks have we had? Oh, we've had 5 leaks. Okay. Were they all the same leak? Oh, no. They weren't all the same leak. They all, 2 of them happened in this way. 2 of them were toilets leaking and the rest were just random weird things. And you go, okay, well, maybe the 2 that the toilet was leaking is a real problem. Like, well, did they both leak at the same spot? No, one leaked at the bowl and the other leaked at where the hose connects to the valve. You're like, well, those are 2 unique problems. So if you would have just said, hey, we got to fix a leak, like there's a lot of problems that it could be happening from. And then when you narrow down to what's a one-off problem, those just maybe circumstances that are kind of outside your control, what's a systematic problem that you need to fix, like even those you got to really, really drill down to like the core root to find out like, hey, are we just, we could have just said, hey, let's just replace all the toilets with this other brand that costs a bunch more money, but the toilet itself isn't even the thing that leaks. It's the parts and pieces that attach to the toilet or the way it was installed that could be it. So there's so many more things that could happen. I think that happens a lot of times, especially with marketing. It's hard to get a scientific representation of why things are the way people feel, behave, and act, because it's not easily quantifiable. And like if somebody does A, they'll exactly do B, or they'll choose C. But it's so intuition driven and like, how has that been kind of going from science to like chaos, I guess?
So there's this quote that I love from, well, I'm not going to remember the quote word for word, but it's this sort of idea that a marketing scientist in Australia who I really admire, he's actually, pretty well renowned. His name's Professor Byron Sharp. He wrote a couple of books called How Brands Grow. Like part 1 and 2, and he talks about sort of the science behind brand and brand growth and marketing. And one sort of analogy he uses right at the beginning of his first book is he says, we need to look at marketing like we look at architecture. So in architecture, or being an architect, you're not going to design a house that falls down, right? Like it has to sort of be built to stand up. Like you can be creative within that framework, but like You're dealing with gravity. And it's sort of the same with marketing. It's like, we're dealing with human behavior, which is psychology. There is a science behind human behavior. We're dealing with the brain. We have a bit of a better idea of how the brain works now. I mean, there's a lot to learn, but we have a good enough idea to at least have some structure around how we're being created. And I think that's what marketing is. It's an art and it's a science. So a lot of people don't know. I actually did an art, sort of like a master's in like creative thinking and art as well. So people go like, but what about art, Laura? And I'm like, no, I think they're both important. I studied both. But, the gap for me is more that there are systems to kind of take that chaos and do something with it. And what a lot of it comes down to is going back to, what are we actually trying to answer? Like, what are we trying to find out here? So we've got our Google Analytics for our website traffic, right? But what do we want to find out from looking at our Google Analytics? What I find a lot of people do is they let the data lead their questions. So they go like, oh, here's all this data, therefore we wanted to know how many people landed on our website. But I'm like, actually, maybe a better question for someone who's looking at business performance would be, well, of the traffic we got, how much converted? That might be a more valuable question to ask in that particular context. So the questions need to be asked based on what the business wants to know, and then the data needs to be analyzed in relation to those questions. So I'll give you an example. I was thinking before about when you said the leaky tap, not the leaky tap, the leaky pipe scenario, right? So, and this is actually a real example someone shared with me where they said, like, they had done all of this work to drive more website traffic using pay-per-click. And they were like, you're going to get a lot more inquiries to this client. And after a couple of weeks, the client was like, look, we're getting heaps more inquiries, but they're not converting. These are bad leads. And the guy was like, I don't actually know if that's true. So again, testing the assumption where a lot of people go, the client says it's bad leads. We need to change our pay-per-click strategies. Mm-hmm. Is it that they're bad leads? Like we know this works for other clients. What's going on here? And he was like, he actually went to the client's office and he turned up early to have a meeting, right? Because this client was like really angry and stuff. And while he's waiting to have the meeting, he's listening to the receptionist who's answering the calls for these inquiries. And he walks into the meeting and he goes, your problem is your receptionist. It's got nothing to do with your pay-per-click strategy. Like, your receptionist is really rude to incoming inquiries. Like, and sort of explained what was happening at the front desk. Mm-hmm. And that was actually driving the problem, So, but it's so easy for us to assume that, well, the data is saying, we're getting inquiries, and the client's saying, well, these aren't converting. This is what my spreadsheet is showing. So therefore, this strategy isn't working. So I think, it has to be applied to a particular business and what they're in. But I don't even know how we got onto that. Does that make sense anyway?
It does. It does completely make sense, because in a sense, it's like you're in marketing, you're telling a story, and there's like predictable paths and genres. And I recently learned a little bit more about this because I help startup businesses as a passion of mine to help them out and help them craft their pitches and do better stuff. And so, when people are creating their pitch, you say, okay, well, you're always selling. You're either selling your product to a customer, or you're selling your business to investors, or you're selling your business to employees, or you're selling, people in this vision that you have in your mind. And so you can just kind of like randomly tell it, or all over the place, or you can start doing what they call the hero's journey. And you probably, the hero's journey, where there's a predictable thing. And it's basically why Star Wars is super successful. It starts off with somebody that's, moving down a path, and they're young and they're on their quest. And then along the way, they learn stuff about themselves. And then they have like a conflict, and then they have like a temptation, and then they have like a coming to Jesus moment. And voila, they've overcome, and they return to home triumphantly. And when you can start telling your story in a predictable path, so it's like you said, it's like, okay, here's the science, here's your formula. Now you take your parts and pieces, your art, and you put it into this formula. And I think another thing too, a lot of businesses don't realize is they think they know who their customer is, but they don't know who it is. Like this was an example to me that really hit home when I was doing some marketing classes, strategic marketing in college. And this professor, he had been a CEO of a very successful commercial real estate broker. And they started like trying to figure out like why that they were any better than anybody else. Because if you're a real estate, commercial real estate agent, like you have a book of business, a book of clients, and it's more repeat business than a home seller that's just, it's a family buyer. So they have this book of business of people that they work with. And so you go, okay, how can I get that book of business to come to my broker versus the other broker? And the answer is they don't. They stay with their realtor. That's who they want to work with. They don't really care what broker that they go to. So when you're advertising to the buyer, you're advertising to the wrong person. So if you start kind of getting your story geared up to who you realize, oh, my client is really the broker. Like I want to attract the brokers. They're the ones that are going to bring me the business. So like you start identifying, okay, now I know who my client is. Now I want to tell a different story. If I'm telling my story to a buyer, it's like, hey, come to me. I got the lowest fees in town and the biggest, property book or whatever. Like that's a different story than come work for me because we have all these tools at your disposal to help you sell more and help your process run smoothly. So you start kind of like reshaping your story based on who the customer really is. So it totally makes sense why there should be a science-based approach, because you really do have to ask better questions. That's the key of it. Ask better questions. Awesome.
It's so like, it's so simple, but I love these things. I love when there's like, you can say something simple, but it's like, actually this really does, it's a game-changing thing that can, it just needs, it's like a shift in mindset, I think. But I was going to come back to your storytelling point as well, because I love talking about storytelling, and I think I know it's talked about a lot, but I still see so many people making this mistake. So I'm like, it's still worth talking about, because until this mistake isn't like everywhere, it needs to be talked about. And that is like, it's not only about, knowing who your customer is, it's also knowing like how to shape that hero's journey around the customer. Because what I find heaps of businesses do is they make the story about them. So they put themselves as the hero, and it's like, no, you're the guide. Your customer is Luke. They want to be Luke Skywalker, and it's like, no, you're not Luke Skywalker. And like just that simple flip of going, this is who we're talking to, and this is what they need to hear. I was writing for an article about this, just a couple of days ago, and it's like we have like, people say, oh, you have 7 seconds. I'm like, in the digital world, you don't have 7 seconds to get attention. The way that you're going to meet that stranger where they are and grab their attention immediately is by recognizing something that's going on in their brain subconsciously. And what a lot of people try to do is they'll say it 2 minutes into their content, so they put a video post up or something like that, and they kind of, I think it's a little bit different with podcasting actually, but that's a tangent. We don't have to go there. But like we were talking about LinkedIn before. So let's say on LinkedIn, you put a 2-minute video piece content up, and you go, oh, it's only 2 minutes, so it's short, so people should listen. And it's like, no, but what did you say in the first 3 seconds? Because if those first 3 seconds is, hi, I'm blah, and today I'm going to talk about blah, it's like, you've lost me. Mm-hmm. If you start with a question, again, this is like the power of asking questions, but if you start with something like, are you finding it really hard to make rent this week? People are like, yeah, I am. That's happening for me right now. Okay, now let's talk about how.
Hold on, I gotta take notes, because this is gonna improve my LinkedIn video strategy. Because I am like, hi, let me waste your time for 30 seconds.
Look, I do it sometimes as well. Sometimes I introduce myself first, but if it's going to be a promo piece, like if people know you, they'll put up with it, and that's where I think like with podcasting and stuff, people expect to be warmed up, and people listening to this now, when we first started talking at the beginning of this conversation, you introduced me, we kind of bit of chit chat, and then we get into the problem that there's problems we want to discuss. But in a 2-minute video piece on social media where someone's thumb is just literally like ready to scroll to the thing that could be a little bit better, that's just after your piece of content, it's like you have to talk directly to that person who they're Luke Skywalker going, I've just been attacked, what do I do now? Where do I go from here? And that's you need to show them that I recognize the situation you're in, and I've got a solution if you keep listening.
That makes perfect sense. Because at least with a podcast people like go, hey, I'm going to make time. I know it's a commitment of, a long form. And I would say anything that's longer than, 10 minutes is long form. Like I'm going to commit to 10 to 20 or 30 or an hour. So I know I'm going to not turn it off 2 seconds in, but you're right. Like if you're scrolling through LinkedIn, you come through and you're like, oh, this video pops up in your feed that you're not expecting. Like, do you stay and watch, or do you keep going? And most people are like, hey, if it doesn't grab me really quickly, I'm going to keep going. So you're very right on that. Now I completely lost. I was going to ask you something else, and oh no, I remember. So this is like you're in marketing. You're telling all these people to do things like to improve their business, but at the same time, like you're marketing for yourself, and like these like observations you have for other businesses, they are like, hey, do this. This is what's going to work. This is the proven system, and like do these steps and give it the time, and it's all going to work out. But like for me, like I'll know these things, but then when I do them for myself, I'm just like banging my head against the wall. Like, why is this not working? Like, how come it? Like, am I doing it right? Am I thinking about it? Like, I'm not objectively looking at my message or how I'm crafting things or my media. Like, do you struggle with those same things of like being able to, either A, step back and approach your own marketing, what would be the word? Just independently of like your personal opinions on it. And then two, like, how do you, handle the I guess the emotional part of it when it's not going as planned?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. And I think everyone, like, I'm going to be really, really honest, because I think a lot of people struggle with this. And even if it makes me look a little bit worse, I think if less people feel alone after this conversation, then it's worth it. So 100% all the time I contradict my advice. Like, all the time. Like I pull myself up on it like pretty much every day. And I'm like pretty hard on myself about it, but it's challenging. And one of the things that I really try to give voice to in the conversations that I'm having on LinkedIn and stuff is like, if marketers are too hard on people, I'll kind of say, well, hang on. But like, let's be honest, it's really hard to run a business. Like, and I think to me, I started seeing it almost as like, as a way of relating to, because my target, my ideal client is someone who actually is not too unlike me in the sense that they're consulting or they're coaching or they have a small business. So I'm like, I actually, if you go to an agency, you're going to deal with, kind of like the agency structure and it's like, this is how we work and stuff. But for me, I'm kind of like, well, look, I'm a business owner and I know how hard it is to market yourself and take care of delivering to clients and be on sales calls, and be dealing now with maybe homeschooling kids or like, I don't have to deal with that. But like, I know a lot of people are. And I'm like, if your website's running slow, look, it's going to affect your business. I understand why your website's running slow because you have 50 million other things to do. So, but I'll give you an example of like something that I do a lot is like, I'll say to people, look, it's important to plan before you act. So we need to think about your content plan. We need to think about, how that's going to feed into your marketing funnel, what the purpose of your content is. But a lot of the time I actually work really intuitively and I'm just like, I need to do this post today and like, I'm just going to film it and put it out and like, I'll do it in the day. But I wouldn't give people that advice. I think I can get away with it because I've created content for a really long time, but it doesn't always work to my advantage. So yeah, I am definitely, and I think we all are in some way doing the hairdresser's hair thing where it's a lot harder to look after your own stuff.
I do that too, where I'm just like, if it's spur of the moment and like I have it like the message planned, I'm just like, all right, I can do this real quick. I'll bang out. If I start planning like messages for like the week, I'm like, I'm just not really feeling that one. I don't really believe in that message today. It just doesn't really resonate with me, and I'll post it out there, or I don't really feel like it, and it's like, if I'm not really feeling like it, is it going to come across? And I start, second guessing and beat myself up. And I think that's why I like podcasting a bit more, because you have like this ability to, I don't know, redeem yourself if you start off slow or you start off kind of boring. Like the conversation can get good and engaging, and I think it's more personal and like showcases a broader sense of yourself than just like, here's my picture, look, I'm smiling, and here's a funny quote. Oh, nobody liked it. Like,
yeah, 100%. And it actually made me think. Like, I've started to change my opinion about this. Like, I used to say that, the same principles apply to growing your business brand and growing your personal brand. But I'm actually starting to think that I need to rethink that statement a little bit, because when we're growing our personal brand, I think people are a little bit more forgiving. And I think that people like to see a bit of that authenticity, that raw. I know authenticity is a bit of an overused word, but people like to see raw content. Sometimes if you look at, like, especially on social media, some of the content that does the best isn't the content that's the most polished. It's the content that is the most real, where if you look at other platforms, that might not work as well. So, I think that with our personal brand and with, redeeming ourselves on a podcast or, those kinds of things, I think that what people ultimately fall in love with is the person. So if you're, and I use those words really intentionally. I think that's actually when you become a fan of someone's work, you fall in love with who that person is or who they present themselves as. Where with a business brand, we are expecting a little bit of a different thing, right? Because it's like, you solve my problem. How much do I need to pay you to solve my problem? This is very transactionary. Where with the personal brand, it's almost like you're starting to build a relationship before you have a conversation.
You totally do. And then when, like, I think for me, like, having coaches in various aspects, whether it's like a fitness coach or a life coach or a business coach, like, or a therapist or a hairstylist, like whatever, like usually the person you end up really settling on is somebody that like you really like, and that you get them and they get you, but they also, hold you accountable and the way you need to be held accountable. So when you're showing that personality of yourself, then I start like relating to you and start getting along with you. And I think for me, at least, the best coaches tend to be somebody that are going to pull the best out of you. But I think also if you're a good, what do you call somebody that's on the other end of a coach? The student is there. Like,
yeah, that works.
Yeah, so if the student challenges the coach to be better, like everybody's just like goes up. And I think that enthusiasm becomes contagious, and that ability to just play at a better level seems to make everybody do better. And so when you can if you find somebody, like, say, I'm going to hire somebody, and they're just going to tell you, like, hey, I hired a coach, and they're going to say, do these 10 posts, and you need to be on all these platforms, and you should post at 9:00 on Friday. It's like, okay, I could do those things, but I'm not really going to feel like super wowed about them. But and maybe I'll struggle to think about content. But if you get with somebody that like really you're engaged with, and you get on the phone and you're talking with them, and like, okay, well, these are the things we're going to do today. And I'm really thinking about, like, your personality could come off this way if you did these other things. And you're like, yeah, I think so too. And I could also do this, and I could do that. And this energy builds, and you just kind of like, you get off the call and you're just like, wow, I want to go conquer the world. That person just helped draw this out of me. I feel like they get me. I feel like they're seeing the things I don't see in myself that are gifts that I could share my message, and I feel more confident selling it versus kind of working in a vacuum and going, I think I like this, and I'm going to post this up, but I don't feel so good about posting it. And I'm not sure I want to expose the side of me. And somebody like yourself might go, no, that's totally like a strength of yours. Like, lead with that, because just own that, because that's a really important, part of your personality, and it's going to come through in your brand and your product or your business too, and take you places. So I think there's some about it where getting to know somebody on a personal level just makes business not feel like business. It doesn't make work feel like work. It just is like, hey, I'm just excited to go do a project with somebody or work out in the gym with, like, it's social hour. Like, it's just like, are we even working, or are we just screwing around for like an hour and a half? But like 5 years down the road, you go, those were like the most productive times of my life, was that engagement like that. And I didn't even feel like I was working.
Yeah. It's that, I love that. Like, I feel like I want to add to that just because I agree to you, but I don't feel like there's anything to add. I feel like you said everything. But like, it just, my mind went so many places when you said that, because I was like, yeah, that's like, it's always like cracked something for me a little bit, in the sense of like, sometimes you're like, I don't know why I don't know why I'm having these types of conversations. Like, what's drawing these particular people in? Why is this happening? And when you said that, I was like, yeah, like one of the really nice pieces of feedback that I've gotten, like, I think, for pretty much since I started my business, is like people really enjoy the time they spend with me, and they'll say that, and like I don't focus on like a hard sell or things like that. Like for me, I find I'm going back to this asking questions thing for today. Like I'm genuinely curious about people. Like I actually am. I'm like, I want to know as many people as I can in my life. Like I just find people fascinating. And I don't mean that in a distant way. I mean that in like a closeness way. Like I think people are, and I know you're the same, Nate. Like I don't right? But it's like when you said the thing about like it not feeling like work, I think that that's the thing, is it's sort of like people really value that connection. They really value that, like someone's seen me for an hour. And I think that's what coaches and mentors and whatever people want to call themselves, I don't think it actually matters too much about the label. I think if you can do that in a conversation, people will just buy whatever you're selling, because they're not buying the product, they're buying you. They're buying that time with you, I think.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think, if you're interviewing people to coach with, you go, okay, well, this person's got like a good resume and this person's got a good resume. Who are you going to pick? You're going to pick the person like that you really get along with better, and then that other person, you say, oh, maybe I didn't get along with them. That's okay, because you're not the right fit. You have different personalities, different wavelengths, different frequencies, and they're going to connect with somebody that's the right fit for them. And, and different people need different things. Like I'm like an idea. I'm like all over the place kind of person. And like, I work really well with somebody that encourages that, but they also say, okay, sit down. You need to do these 10 steps, quit, sidetracking it to go onto this other thing. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I do get kind of like all over the place, and I have to stay focused. So it's all about, personality and connections. It's funny because it's true though, because you're, go back to you talk about meeting as many people. I think that's super fun to do, because you never know. That's how I think we started talking the first time we chatted. We like got on the phone for like 15 minutes and turned it into like a long hour, I think. And it's just like, you meet these people, you say, okay, what am I going to do with a marketing coach from LinkedIn in Australia about, like, what good is that going to do? There's not this immediate like thing where you see like, hey, there's a reason to have a conversation, but you start conversing, you start talking about the things you're working on, you start sharing ideas, and then you start taking some of those ideas away, and you go, okay, there's people within my network that now I have ideas, or I have connections to other people that I can expose them to you, and you can, share your knowledge with other people. But when we just go out there, and I don't know where this comment's going, but it's kind of going all over the place, but it's talking about like the deeper level of the connection is when you start building it like a friendship, those things tend to be deeper. They tend to last longer, and they're more fruitful. Like you might not always see anything great happen immediately, but they tend to work out over time. Like somebody will introduce you to somebody else because of this connection you had. When it's just collecting cars or collecting connections or buying followers, it's very shallow, and it like might get you some immediate like looks and see. But if nobody really trusts you, thinks you're kind of shammy, then they're not going to like really engage with you long term, and they're not going to make meaningful introductions down the road. So I love just getting on the phone with somebody I've never met before and just, hey, what's your story? What are you up to? And, what are your likes, dislikes? And then, oh, you have something of interest. Let's talk about that. That's business related, but maybe sometimes you don't even get down to that part. But, usually you try to make, you make friends with somebody, and then you like try to like, how can I help that person out? Because helping out people, for me, that's like where it really feels fulfilling, is when you can help somebody else out. And you're like, that person's really awesome. Like they got a cool business. How could I help them grow?
It's so true. Like I was actually thinking, like, because I want to pull this, like because of my the structure. I have a tussle. I have a very structured part of myself and a very unstructured part of myself, and they're almost 50% each. So they have a lot of arguments. And I was like, I want to pull this back to the business science thing, because this is what the data in my own business has told me. What the data in my own business has told me is, if business as usual is that I just have a certain number of conversations with people every week. They're not sales calls, they're not strategy sessions, they're not anything other than people who I genuinely want to connect with. I know that I'll get about one opportunity a week out of that. Mm-hmm. So let's say I have 5 to 10 of those conversations. They're not necessarily all like opportunities, again, in the sense of like, oh, I want to do business with you right now. But sometimes that's not the best opportunity anyway. Like sometimes it's the person who's like, actually, I'm, going to get funding for this thing and I want you to be part of this project in 3 months' time. And it's like, that's worth heaps than like making $1,000 sale on a phone call, or, the person who goes like, actually, I need to introduce you to, I've got like this whole Facebook group and they all need to know about this message, or I've got this podcast, or, so I think like it's less objective driven, but it actually, when I'm looking at the data, I'm like, I've done the whole do a sales call and like try to sell on the call and like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no conversions. I just have conversations with people, conversions. Which one's working better?
Well, you have to you definitely have to be patient, because some of these they're like planting seeds and planting relation. You don't know what's going to grow and what's not. So like you can't just go, oh, on paper, this person looks like somebody I should talk to and this person doesn't, because chances are like it's always the opposite. The person you thought like, oh, there's nothing happening here, like they turn out to be this amazing person you get in your life. Maybe they're an immediate lead, or maybe they connect you to like 1,000 people versus this one person that, hey, they look on paper right, and it turns out to be the crappiest client you could possibly have, and you just want to get rid of them. So it's all about building relationships and taking the time to let them come up. And the industry I'm in, we do a lot of big deals where we're purchasing lots and lots of product that a phone call is not going to make the decision to change over. Like there's a lot of reputation at stake. And usually what we do is we pre-qualify any of the suppliers. Like, hey, if you're not a certain level, like we're just not even going to look at you. So we're already kind of just down to like 3 or 4 people you can pick from. And then it's really at that point becomes like, hey, who's going to deliver? Who can I trust? Who can I call up if there is a problem? Because there's always problems, and is going to jump up and get it resolved for me. And those are that's where the relationship comes in, and it's real handy, and it doesn't come in overnight. So if I just had a phone call with somebody, I'm not going to throw away the current relationship I have with my current vendor because he called me. It's going to take some time. And if you don't want to put in the time and effort to get to know me, then how am I going to know that you're going to, hold up your end of the bargain when the time comes? And then as time progresses, then usually, these relationships, they evolve and they do stuff. And sometimes the people that you're connected with at one company, they leave and go somewhere else. And then the new person that comes in, there's not a relationship. You're not treated the same way. And you're like, this ain't working out too good. Where's this person that's been knocking on my door for 4 or 5 years? And we just know each other. Like I know who his kids are. I know what school they go to. I know this and this. And I think he sells the same thing we're buying, but come on in, let's talk about, oh, you do. It's about time. Let's do this. And then, it doesn't happen overnight. And that's why I think, you go back to meeting people and this idea of okay, if I meet enough people a week, good things are bound to happen. So and I hate talking about this because building relationships with people is very personal, but then you go, well, if I want to make 2 friends, I got to talk to 10, And then it's just it's just a numbers game, but it is kind of a numbers game because you don't know who's going to be cool. It's a bit, so you do kind of play this numbers game, and then you go, okay, well, if I want to meet 4 people this week, or talk to 20, and then you start, you get too many people trying to talk to, then you can't get depth with anybody, and it doesn't pan out so good either. So there's a little balance, a little art and science at the same time.
It's true, isn't it? There is this kind of it's sort of I think when we were chatting for my show, you were saying that when you give people generally want to help you out if you help them out, and I was like, yes, it's true, but I also hate when people gamify it because it becomes the law of reciprocity or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but if you're giving only to get something in return, it has a completely different flavor to it, and it's the whole kind of conversation. And I think you know, that's the challenge is like it's this, what we're talking about really is personal development. It's not, oh, how do I say the right things and do the right things? It's actually, you know, how do I become that person who is genuinely curious about people? And it's not you can act the act, but it won't work the same way. I don't believe in.
I think it's like having like a dinner party, and if you're inviting like people over to your house for a dinner party, you think, hey, who are some really cool people that I want to spend some time with? And I think they would enjoy spending time with these other people I would invite, and it's just going to be a good time. And we're just going to have this nice dinner, and we're going to have a nice afternoon or evening or whatever. And whatever happens. It's just going to be fun because I think these people are really going to have a good time and get to know each other. Versus, I want to have this really nice party so that I could get something from somebody. I'm going to invite people that I think owe me something, like, or I could get an invite to their house because they got a nice house and I'd like to see what their house is like. Or I'm going to invite this client over here because I want to get their business. It's like, then it becomes, you know, transactional, I think, too. And then when things don't pan out and like, oh, well, I invited you to my house for dinner and you didn't give me the job, or I invited you to my house, you didn't invite me back to your house for your party. Like, it then you don't feel like good inside. Like if it's just like, hey, everybody just came, we had a good time, and you know, people talk about that and they say, yeah, I had such a wonderful time at this person's house. Like, and then like when the opportunity comes to have another one, then people are like, hey, how can I get to like your really cool party? So I don't know. That makes sense.
I mean, and that's why, like, we talked about this as well, like podcasting. Sorry, not on your show. We talked about this previously, but like, this is what's cool about podcasting as well, I think, because it's such an easy way to get people to come to your party. I think you put it like that. Like, it's getting the cool kids to come to your party kind of thing, right?
I didn't put it that way. Gary Vee put it that way. But I was that kid in high school that wasn't that popular. And I had my parents went away for the weekend, and I had a really, really big party at my house. And there was a ton of people there. It was crazy. And my parents were not too happy when they came home. It smelled like beer. The whole house smelled like beer. Cool. Well, we've been chatting for a long, long time. This is longer than I usually go. But where can people, before we leave, what are your parting words of wisdom, if you haven't already shared it?
I think I'm going to choose to provide some parting words on the personal brand topic, just because it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is like, if you think you need to wait until you're, perfect, or you've achieved certain things in life to have a conversation with someone, or to present yourself a certain way, or to go and speak, or to put yourself out there, start a podcast, you're kind of missing the point. Like, the point of all of this stuff is like, to get to wherever it is you want to go, you need to start the process now. And again, what people fall in love with is the humanness of us. It's not the perfection. So that's what I would just say to anyone who's kind of like feeling like they're holding themselves back, is lean into conversations, lean into putting yourself out there, because it is pretty amazing how quickly some really exciting opportunities can start popping up.
It does. I think once you get going, it just starts to get a little bit of momentum. It's uncomfortable. There's no doubt about that, but it's a lot of fun, and you just gotta stick with it. So that's awesome. Awesome parting advice. So, Lauren, where can people find you? Where should we send them?
Look, LinkedIn is probably the best, because we've been talking about LinkedIn. So if you just look up Lauren Kress, which is with a K, on LinkedIn, you'll find me. And if you want to connect, just let me know that you heard about me through Nate's show, and I'll be happy. I mean, I do connect with most people, but it's always nice to know where people have come from.
Yes, if you want to get to know Karen, you have to DM me first, and I'll see if she's accepting friend requests at the currently. There's a screening process. Very exclusive group.
No screening process for me.
Awesome. Well, I'll put that in the show notes, and I'll link to your website and everything else. So if anybody wants to hop on the phone with you and have a conversation, get to know you, maybe you'll be the next conversation?
100% happy to. Thanks,
Awesome.
Dave.
Thank you so much for coming on.
It's been a pleasure.
Make sure to visit our website, therealnatepeo.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, so you'll never miss an episode of All In. While you're at it, if you found value, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if simply tell 2 friends about the show. Looking to connect? You can find Nate Peo on LinkedIn or Instagram.